How do I know as a parent, as a teacher, that this child is not, scapegoating at some point or using mental health because they know that once we mention mental health, I'll coil? How do we know?
Children are not socializing as often as you and I were socializing when we were younger. As a matter of fact, parents are using phones to pacify their children or to keep them from going out to play.
Hello everyone, thank you for joining us today. This is the Teachers Podcast AE and my name is Ms. Mokaya. On this podcast, we talk about everything child well-being and safeguarding. And to start us off in this season is Linus. Linus is a good friend of mine, but I'll allow him to introduce himself and tell us what he does.
Hi everyone, my name is Linus Oyugi. I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm also the founder of the Above the Algorithm, which is a podcast where I aim to challenge harmful viral ideas that sometimes young people have. I try to replace that with evidence-based speak and conversations.
Okay. Welcome. Tell us a bit about challenging viral ideas before we get into the topic for today.
Yeah, that's a good question. I've found in my clinical setting that I've actually been practicing for the last 5 years. And in my practice, having conversations with mostly young people, I've come to the realization that one of the biggest problems that we have in today's society is misinformation, where young people are forming ideas and opinion, not based on facts, but based on conjecture or even lack of research. And I try to challenge that kind of speak or idea with facts and data and research.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. Do you think that's a thing that you find more, that young people, especially teens, just consume information without verifying information?
Oh yes, there's that. There's teens not having the tools that they need to consume information online.
Yeah.
But it also that's half of the problem. The other half is a lot of propaganda and misinformation peddled by big corporate news agencies, by governments, by political ideologies.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me, if you were not a psychologist, what would you be?
That's an interesting question. Interestingly, before I learned about psychology, I wanted to be a neurosurgeon.
Yeah.
I really wanted to be a neurosurgeon, but my grades in high school didn't allow me to do medicine.
Yeah.
So I was looking for something as close to neurosurgery as possible, and I landed on psychology. Psychology is basically the study of the software of the brain.
Yeah. Which is medical enough.
So I'll be a neurosurgeon if I wasn't a psychologist.
Okay. I want us to talk about the pandemic of mental health issues, especially among the Gen Zs. And I think it's become a buzzword to talk about mental health, to talk about anxiety, to talk about depression. Maybe start by painting a picture of what you do and how busy your day is, and what statistic constitutes the young people. Yeah.
So it's interesting that you mentioned the pandemic, or other people call it the epidemic of mental health.
Yeah.
So there's clearly a mental health crisis among Gen Zs, and it's unique because other generations, it seems to me like Gen Zs are facing mental health issues that other generations never had to face.
Yeah.
I'll just give you an example. You've heard about a condition known as gender dysphoria.
Yeah.
Or where a young person feels like they're trapped in the wrong body. So this is not new. We've always had people with gender dysphoria. We used to call it gender identity disorder in the past.
Yeah.
It's not new. But it seems to me like since 2020, there's been an explosion of kids presenting with gender dysphoria.
Yeah.
So what do we know about gender dysphoria? Gender dysphoria is a condition that affects, that starts, the onset of gender dysphoria is early, from the age of 3 to 4. So when you find your child wanting to play with toys of the opposite gender, dressing like the opposite gender, basically having mannerisms of the opposite gender. So the onset of gender dysphoria is very early. But what has happened since 2020, we've had an explosion of children and teenagers from as early as, from as old as the age of 18, 16, 17, some even 20 and 21, who never really had gender dysphoria in their childhood. All of a sudden, they're claiming that they're trapped in the wrong body, and they'd like to transition to the other gender, which includes cross-sex hormones, medical transitioning, like cutting off of the breast or removal of the genitalia, and all these have very, very negative consequences. So that's just one part of it. But if you look at it generally, we are definitely having a mental health crisis among young people, especially Gen Zs. For example, there's a condition known as attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. In a space of 10 years, the number of children that we're diagnosing with ADHD has more than quadrupled. Teenage suicidal ideation among girls has more than 1,000% increased in a space of less than 5 years. There's a gentleman called Jonathan Haidt, he wrote a book titled The Anxious Generation. He calls the Gen Zs, also my favorite book. He calls the Gen Zs the anxious generation, for rightly so, because Gen Zs have actually been found to be the most anxious generation in history. So there's clearly a unique psychological challenge that Gen Zs are facing.
As Africans and Kenyans are that, when you talk about a child being ADHD, a child having suicidal ideations, my first reaction would be, how come and why now? What happened that we have all these things that we didn't talk about? Number one. Number two, if we look at it properly, what is this that is making more kids want to be in the right body? Would you say that's a mental health issue, or is that an issue of influence?
So that's a really, really good question. I think I'll try to answer them both with one answer. Why now? And what are we talking? What is this thing that we're calling children wanting to transition to the opposite gender? So the evidence is quite clear that technology is having vast negative consequences on children. And again, our favorite book, Jonathan Haidt, he writes about this quite brilliantly, I think. He says, he talks about a period called the Great Rewiring, starting from 2010 to 2015. So what's unique about Gen Zs is that this is the first generation in history to grow up with mobile phones in the teenage. You and I, although I'm also a Gen Z, but I'm in the last quadrant of Gen Zs, we grew up, we had a play-based childhood. Well, our parents would allow us to go out and play. We'd get injured sometimes. We'd have fun. We'd get lost, or we'd do all manner of crazy
and
things.
Find our way back.
The science is so clear that is actually what constitutes a healthy childhood. Free play with minimal supervision. But now Gen Zs had mobile phones when they're growing up. And Jonathan Haidt says that there's four consequences for this phone-based childhood. One, there's attention fragmentation. This is ADHD, where children who don't have ADHD are now having symptoms that mimic ADHD, where they have a very short attention span, they cannot concentrate in class. That's not ADHD. You just need to monitor their phone usage. Number two, social deprivation. Children are not socializing as often as you and I were socializing when you were younger. As a matter of fact, parents are using phones to pacify their children or to keep them from going outside to play. And that is a big problem, especially for boys who need more rough and tumble play than girls. There's also addiction. Children are getting addicted to mobile phones. Gen Zs are spending somewhere between 7 to 8 hours on average every day on phones and screen time. So those are three. I forget one. Maybe if I remember at some point, I'll mention. You also asked about gender identity disorder. What exactly is happening here? First of all, as I mentioned, throughout history, we've always had people who don't feel like they are in the right body, or they feel like they're trapped in the wrong body. So the problem is that since 2020, we've had an explosion of these cases. For example, in Britain alone, we had a 4,000% increase in the number of trans-identifying teenagers and young adults, that should be looked at with a lot of skepticism.
Yeah.
I think for me, if you ask me, I've actually met people who are actually genuinely transgender.
Yeah.
People who maybe for them they may benefit from transitioning.
Yeah.
But I do believe that what has been happening since 2020 is a psychogenic epidemic, is where ideas, that's what I'm also trying to do with my podcast, where bad ideas are spreading, especially among a group of people. And how do we know about that? Social contagion, so psychogenic epidemics, tend to spread more among women than men. Anorexia has been found to be a social epidemic.
Yeah.
There's other psychogenic epidemics, but in the past, almost every person that would identify as a trans individual was male, was a man, was a biological man transitioning
to be a woman.
femalehood.
Yeah.
But now that turned around to about 80% of them being females wanting to transition to masculinity or to manhood, and that in itself is a red flag. It is very, very consistent with what we know social contagions in terms of how they manifest.
Now let's look at our context, because one of the things that we talk about as Kenyans is that's a Western idea, okay? But in my experience as a teacher, a lot of Western ideas are affecting our children. So one of the things that I also wonder is, are we enabling too much? Do we scapegoat sometimes and forget about, we throw anxiety here, we throw mental health here, depression here. You will hear children saying, I'm so depressed. Where do we draw the line between holding children accountable? Because I've talked about, accountability and how we allow children to just be.
Yeah.
So how do I know as a parent, as a teacher, that this child is not, scapegoating at some point or using mental health because they know that once you mention mental health, I'll coil? How do we know the difference?
That's a really good question. First of all, for me personally, I would not envy the position of any parent in today's generation.
Yeah.
Because yes, just like parents in today's generations are facing unique challenges that other parents, in my opinion, have not faced.
Yeah.
We're talking about kids who go on social media and they get all manner of diagnoses on social media.
Yeah.
And now they come to their parents claiming that I have anxiety or I have ADHD. And another problem in today's, especially we're talking about Gen Z specifically, they tend to use psychological diagnoses as a label. It's not just about psychological diagnosis, also including their sexual orientation.
Yeah.
So when a Gen Z finds out that they are attracted to the same gender, they want to make that their identity and even have that on their profile or on their stories on the social media. So they want to put their diagnosis and the sexual orientation ahead of them. Like it should be like,
them. That's the identity.
That's who I am and that's my identity.
Yeah.
And I'd like to challenge Gen Zs that should not really be your identity. Even if you feel like you're attracted to the same gender, like as a psychologist, I would like not to judge. That shouldn't really be identity that you put forward. And also, Gen Zs are also taking a psychological diagnosis like attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and anxiety and depression as an identity, and they're labeling.
So it becomes that's who I am entirely.
And that's not who you are. Even if you have that condition, it only represents a small portion of who you are, and you are many, many, many things apart from your diagnosis.
And that's a really good point to make.
Yeah.
Because now, a student will come and ask me, or a child would come and ask me, what do you think about gay people? And I'm like, what about? Because what I usually ask them, I've been straight all my life. I've never asked, what do you think about? Why do children need this? Is it that they need something to is it that we haven't given them an identity? Or is it that they are trying to find something to be relevant about?
It could be a little bit of both.
Yeah.
But there's a man called Erik Erikson. He talked about the 8 stages of life.
Yeah.
And I think the second or the third stage is ego identity versus role confusion. That is the period between the ages of around 13 to 18. So most children are in that period of either they're trying to figure out what their identity is or they're confused about their identity. So this is why young Gen Zs and teenagers are particularly vulnerable to adopting other things as their identity, because they're in that period. And I think this is where now parents need to step in and make sure that you're there for your child, or don't really... I'll just tell you something that I learned. There's a famous podcast that I really like very much. I'm not going to mention his name. I've been watching him and following him for years. And I never really knew about this person's sexual orientation. I found out recently that this person is actually gay, that is attracted to the same gender.
Yeah.
And I don't really judge him based on that. I think Gen Zs can emulate they can emulate such kind of people. You
Yeah.
can be many things, and you don't really have to put your sexual identity
Out
or
there.
sexual orientation out there, or let it define you as a person. But then, how do parents know? Because you asked these questions earlier.
Yeah.
How do they tell the difference between children scapegoating, as you mentioned, and it being a mental health condition?
Yeah.
A lot of times, you may not know.
Yeah.
You might need to seek help from a qualified practitioner, and you also need to be very, very careful when it comes to choosing practitioners, because there are psychologists and counselors who are actually going to even, I'm trying to look the word,
Enable.
they're going to enable,
Yeah.
As soon as the child tells them that I am trapped in the wrong body, they're actually going to enable them and start to use their preferred pronouns, and it's going to be a huge problem. So even when you're looking for a psychologist, do a lot of research, find out who they are, and also be part of the process and feel confident to question them and to question them about their beliefs, about the methods that they're using. Because I realize that nowadays even parents just leave their children to psychologists. We trust our psychologists too much. We don't know that psychologists can actually also be radical, can be radicalized, can have ideologies that are a bit out of the ordinary.
Interesting.
So the right way to do it is to go to a practitioner.
So what you're saying is a parent need to be involved in the journey of the mental wellness of their child.
Absolutely.
Now, you've raised another point. In terms of the psychologist that you use, there's a possibility that the psychologist can also radicalize the child.
Yes.
Which brings me to this question. What's the place of religion? I've had students tell me, I would like to see a psychologist, but not the ones from church.
Yeah.
Have we over-religialized, that's not a word, but have we over-spiritualized mental well-being that we think if my child is unwell, depressed, anxious, if we pray for them, they will be fine? Is that something you've experienced?
For me, I'd say quite the opposite.
Yeah.
That I think mental health is moving away from spirituality, and I do believe that you need a balance of both.
Okay.
I think as a psychologist, I'm a Christian myself, I try as best as I can not to allow my own spiritual beliefs
to come in the way.
To shadow my judgment or to influence the way that I view my clients. And some psychologists are not able to do that. Even though I try, sometimes I fail. I think you can be a psychologist and have very strong spiritual views and not allow that affect your judgment in terms of how you're handling your client. But to say that, although I do believe that we should draw a line between spirituality and counseling and mental health, I'm not saying that spirituality doesn't help and spirituality doesn't work. As a matter of fact, studies do show that as societies move away from spirituality, the mental health crisis increases. There's a famous philosopher, his name was Friedrich Nietzsche. He was an atheist. He wrote about what he called the death of God. And what he said is that God has died and we have killed him. He said that societies that does not have God are societies that will have a crisis of meaning. And a crisis of meaning will lead to a crisis of mental health. And I do believe that that is definitely what is also happening with Gen Zs, where they are, the male Gen Zs that are becoming more conservative, they're turning to God, but female Gen Zs uniquely are turning away from religion. And that has been associated with decrease in mental health, or increase in suicidality. You know that religion does inoculate you from suicidal ideation and suicidal thought. And so what is quite clear is that as a society becomes less religious, mental health crisis increases.
So in essence, the fact that we have less and less inclination towards God or a certain higher power, the more we are likely to suffer mental illness.
Yes, even studies looking at suicidality does show that having a religious belief, regardless of who you are, you're Muslim, you're Christian, you're Hindu, can inoculate you from suicidal thought or even suicidal attempt. Religious people are less likely to have suicidal ideation or suicidal attempt or suicidal thought than non-religious people. It's clear as day.
Okay. So you said something about lack of meaning. Say that again, please.
Yes. Nietzsche wrote about the death of God. He said that societies that are becoming less spiritual will lack meaning because spirituality does give us a deep sense of meaning. And he says that lack of meaning will lead to a crisis of mental health.
Crisis,
And as you can see,
yeah.
Gen Zs, they're having a meaning crisis, an identity crisis.
Okay.
And it's no surprise why maybe we're having an explosion of mental health cases among Gen Zs. Yeah.
Still staying on this religion, because it's been quite a discussion for me and my students. So there's the religion that we know, of course, that gives us a sense of meaning.
Yeah.
But there's a clash of the religion that we present to our children and how we act. For example, a student will tell you, yes, I know that God is good. However, the God that my father and my mother is presenting to me looks a bit unreasonable. Number one. Number two, when we are seeking God, can we seek God and also seek support in terms of the mental illness that I am? We tend to look like we fight accepting that there's a problem.
Yeah.
So we'd rather pray about it. But to the child, it doesn't look like you're actively seeking help.
Yeah.
Would you say something about that?
Oh, yeah. So children are very smart individuals. If they preach them about Jesus and you don't behave like Jesus, they will know. And they're going to reject your Jesus. If you preach them about Muhammad and they read about Muhammad and they see that there's a difference between the way that you behave from what Muhammad prescribes, they will reject Muhammad.
And I think parents don't give children that credit.
Yeah.
That they now can access this information and compare what you're telling them and how you're acting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I forget the second part of the question. What was it?
Religion, I mean, we'll remember about it.
Okay.
We'll remember, but it's the religion that we are using to cover that there's a problem.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Also, I think what I got is that can you have both?
Yeah.
Can you be a religious person that goes to church and still send your children to therapy?
Yes.
Did I get that right?
Yes.
I think that's a picture that you painted in my mind. As a Christian, I don't believe that any one negates the other.
Yeah.
I don't believe that taking medicine negates the miracle of Jesus. For example, you know about the story of Jesus healing the blind person in the river of Siloam.
Yes.
Although Jesus is God himself and he can clearly perform magic and command the person to open the eyes and see, he prays for the man, but then I think he takes soil.
Yeah.
He mixes it with saliva and then puts on his eyes and then tells him to go and wash his eyes in the river of Siloam. And then he comes back seeing. So, I mean, what was the
action?
Yeah, the action, the ritual of having to do a physical thing and having to go to the river.
Yeah.
So you can be a Christian that prays, but your action of going to the river of Siloam might be going to see a therapist.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean that if you pray and you take medicine or you go to seek therapy, you're actually negating God. As a matter of fact, the people that you're actually going to see in therapy are God's creation. They're God's creation, and medicine, psychiatric medicine, is actually extracted from plants and natural products from the environment, which are God's creation. So if you're a Christian, you should actually believe that when an antipsychotic or an antidepressant works, it's actually God also performing the healing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's been quite a struggle. For example, a child will tell you, when I have a cough, I'll be taken to the hospital quicker than when I'm saying I am anxious, because it sounds like we can find a solution outside of the hospital. So it degenerates then further down from anxiety to self-harm, and I think this is something that parents are quite unaware of, because the self-harm is on the body, but we don't understand. And I know even in the Bible there are, allusions of somebody with demons and they were cutting themselves. Can you talk about self-harm?
Well, self-harm is also, I think you'd put it in the same category as this rapid onset gender dysphoria that I was calling a social contagion. It tends to spread among a group of people. If you find that your child is self-harming, you might need to ask yourself, who else in her social group is self-harming? Especially non-suicidal self-harm. There's a difference between suicidal self-harm and non-suicidal self-harm. Non-suicidal self-harm is basically bluffing. It's basically manipulation. I want a PlayStation 5 and my dad says that he cannot get me a PlayStation 5, so I'm going to do this to see if I can convince him to get me a PS5.
So it's manipulation.
So it can actually be manipulation. Although it's manipulation, we still tell parents take it seriously, because they will bluff and one day you'll wake up and they've actually done it. So it's an issue also, just like other social contagions. It seems to spread more among women or girls than boys. So you tend to see self-harm among girls than you see it in boys.
So let's say a student, my child has self-harm marks. What should be my first reaction? Do I call it bluff or do I get help?
Don't call it bluff.
Yeah.
Get help. But what parents don't do in today's generation is research about the helper. So do
Let's go back there. Let's go back
research
there.
about the helper.
Yeah.
Find a person
Yeah.
that has got enough experience.
Yeah.
Know about them.
Yeah.
Nowadays, you can even find out about somebody on social media. Know
About what
who
they do.
they are, what
Yeah.
do they do, what
Yeah.
do they believe,
Yeah.
and what people say about their services. How many people? What's the success rate?
Okay.
Yeah. So the best
Who will
thing.
talk about it though? I'm not. I will be very hesitant to say, "Oh, I saw." Okay, I will because I have information. I can share information. For example, I can say Linus can connect with students and they can do 1, 2, 3, isn't it? Who will be happy to say this psychologist saved my child?
Unfortunately, because we are still in early days when it comes to mental health in Africa,
Yeah.
what you might want to try to do is trial and error. You might need to just find a psychologist with the information that you have, try them,
Yeah.
speak to them,
Yeah.
be part of the process.
some
If
intuition.
you don't like anything
Yeah.
about the process, question them about it.
Yeah.
If you feel like they can't change it,
Yeah.
move on to the next person.
Okay. Until
Yeah,
you find the right
until you
fit.
find the right fit.
Just
until
like
you
we
find
do
the right-
nannies and employees.
Yeah, it's a difficult. It's a difficult. One of the biggest problems that we have in today's mental health industry is
Yeah.
that it's like the mental health industry, the way that it's designed,
Yeah.
it tends to validate the client
Yeah.
and never really question the client and force the client sometimes to look inward. So even the way that sometimes I even interview my clients, I have
Yeah.
to be very, very careful how I'm asking them the question.
Yeah.
Because there's a way that you can ask them the questions, and the narrative that they're creating in their mind is that I am a victim. I am a victim of my parent.
Yeah.
I'm a victim of my situation. I'm a victim of my boyfriend or my partner. But that is not what therapy is about. Therapy is actually should make you look inward rather
To
than
find
outward.
the tools to
Yeah.
help you.
And I'll tell you something about maybe mental health in general. There's generally two types of people in the world.
Yeah.
There's people who have an internal locus of control and people who have an external locus of control. So people that have an internal locus of control, people who, whenever they have a crisis, and you can also think about your children as well,
Yeah.
they tend to look inward.
Yeah.
Dad, I failed in my math test. Well, instead of trying to blame the teacher that the teacher didn't show up on three lessons, or I haven't been sleeping well, or there's been chaos in the house,
Yeah.
they'll try to ask themselves, what have I done to contribute to this failure? These
Yeah.
are people who have an internal locus of control.
Yeah.
But then there's people who have an external locus of control. Whenever they're in a crisis, they try to look for how can they blame Ruto, how can they blame Trump, how can they
Yeah.
blame the economy,
Yeah.
how can
Other
they
than
blame their
self.
husband.
Yeah.
So what we know is that there's a clear distinction between these two people. People that have an internal locus of control have better mental health outcomes.
Okay.
People that have an external locus of control that tend to blame Ruto and Trump
Yeah.
have very, very, very bad mental health outcomes. And it seems to me, if you're not careful with the choices of your therapist, you can find a therapist that helps you look outward, that and reinforces that external locus of control, and it's only going to make you feel worse. It's only going to make you dependent on therapy for the rest of your life, because you're never, ever going to look inward. And even after a breakup, it's rarely that one partner was the problem.
Yeah.
So you need to ask yourself, what did I do to contribute to this? And
So it sounds like a commercialization of therapy.
yeah,
And I think sometimes parents will tend to feel like this therapist, and I mean, I speak to parents because those are the people that I work with the most, and students, they tend to feel like this person is trying to validate the child instead of holding the child accountable to their own actions and speech. So if I find a therapist that does not agree with me or does not agree with the child, then we run. But there's the other thing that you talked about at the beginning, putting the parent in the room. In the process of therapy, I'm not handing you over my child for you to fix.
yeah,
It's we find a solution
together.
To help this child.
One of
I
the
am
biggest
just a
red flag as a
professional.
parent
Yeah.
is that when you take your teenager to a psychologist,
Yeah.
you always feel like there's a wall that has been put up between you
Yeah.
and whatever is happening in that process.
Yeah.
Run. Because you're a parent, that child is not yet 18.
Yeah.
They're supposed to get assent from you. Although the things that they discuss will be confidential.
Yeah.
There's limits of confidentiality.
Yeah.
When the person is younger than the age of 18,
Yeah.
then the parent should know
Should
about
be
what's
put in
happening in
the
the
room.
process. You should be put in the room. As soon as you feel like you send your child to a place and
Yeah.
then you realize that sometimes they would even turn the child against you.
Yeah.
Like this is what is happening with trans children in the West.
Yeah.
As soon as a child tells their parents that I want to transition to the other gender, and the parent says no, I know you have raised you since you're young.
Yeah.
I don't think this is the case. Let's give it time.
Yeah.
And then the child goes to see a school counselor. The school counselor would actually form like a cahoot with the client
Yeah.
and the government,
Yeah.
and they would even take the child away from you and take them to a center where they have children
Yeah.
and perform all those surgeries without your consent as a parent. So it should be a really big red flag. That's an extreme scenario, but a parent ought to be involved in the process.
So can I call out a parent?
Yeah.
Or can I call out a therapist? Especially, and I find that it is somebody who is influential, for example. I can't tell you that you're an absent father, that's why your child is like this, or you're an abusive mother, or there's some things you've not dealt with that are hurting your child. How much authority should the psychologist have without being told, I am paying you?
Yeah. Even in normal situations, psychologists are not supposed to give directives like that. We don't give advice. It's not our work to call out. I think since you are the one that is paying and you have although sometimes, a lot of times psychologists are actually right.
Yeah.
It's the parent that is the problem, oftentimes.
Yeah.
So you need to be very careful. Sometimes you are actually the problem.
Okay.
Or the dynamics within the family is the
Yeah.
problem. But if you genuinely feel
Yeah.
like this is not the right thing that my child needs,
Yeah.
or this is actually creating more harm than good,
Yeah.
then find an alternative.
Find
You
an
have the
alternative.
power.
All right.
You have the power to do so.
So the message here is get help, but be discerning enough
Yeah.
to know. And I think the other thing I would say is know your child at every developmental stage so that you're able to tell something is going on wrong, because most of the time we see when it's a bit too late, then you realize we lost this child at 9 years old. They're now 15. They're seeking help and the parent has lost some time.
Yeah.
I would like now to look at the boy child. And I know that's something you're very passionate about.
Yeah.
So I would like you to speak about what has happened to the boy child versus what has happened to the girl child in terms of empowerment, and why is gaming working for the boy children as opposed to socialization?
Okay, so that's like two questions
Yeah.
in one. The boy child definitely is having unique issues and unique challenges.
Yeah.
Before 1960, we live in a different world where women were subjugated. I think you can use that,
Yeah,
that women
yeah.
were subjugated.
Yeah.
There's virtually no woman within the job setting.
Yeah.
It was all men. Women maybe were housekeepers. And in a situation where you got married to a bad man or an evil man, life was horrible. Life was
Yeah.
hell for you as a woman.
Yeah.
But since the 1960s, which coincides with the time where we invented the birth control,
Yeah.
we've made changes
Yeah.
to help and support women, and rightly so. And we talk about women empowerment. I think it's good that we've done women empowerment, and
Yeah.
it's good that we'll continue to do women empowerment. But what has happened is that when we are lifting women, we are not lifting men as well.
Yeah.
So men are left behind.
Yeah.
I think it should happen both ways. It should happen concurrently.
Yeah.
For example, we know that there's been efforts to try to increase the number of women in STEM jobs, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, because women were severely underrepresented in those
Yeah.
fields. But then there's other jobs where men are severely underrepresented, but we're not doing anything to look into that, like heal jobs. I'm also part of what we call the heal jobs.
Yeah.
Health,
Yeah.
education, administration, and literature.
Yeah.
Men are severely underrepresented in these fields. For example, in psychology,
Yeah.
if you go look for a therapist, you're about 80% more likely
Female.
to see a female psychologist
Yeah.
than a male psychologist.
Yeah.
It's not because men don't want to go there.
Yeah.
It's because it's harder for men to get to such fields. So we are uplifting women and
Yeah.
not lifting.
Who is
lifting
we
men.
though, Linus? Who is we?
It's government.
do this?
It's
Yeah.
government.
Yeah.
We have policies like affirmative action.
Yeah.
We have.
So do we need a policy for men?
Yeah, we have diversity, equity, and inclusion
yeah.
in the West.
Yeah.
That looks at what they call historically marginalized communities, transgender, gay, bisexual, and women are also included in that category.
Yeah.
But we don't have any person looking at men. We also have Ministry of Gender. We have women's reps.
Yeah.
We have all those things, but we don't have any person specifically looking at male issues. And that's why, in my opinion, we're looking at a male suicide crisis or a mental health crisis. For example, men are 50% of the population, but 85% of people that die by suicide are men. I'll just give you an example. We definitely had a femicide problem in Kenya.
Yeah.
It's a huge problem.
Yeah.
Nobody should die in the hands of the person that they trust.
Yeah.
Recently, the government took about 100 million Kenya shillings.
Yeah.
I don't know where that money went, and put it aside to try to combat femicide.
Yeah.
Do you know at the same time, there was about seven times as many men dying by homicide than women?
Oh.
And it's always consistent that there's actually 7 times more men being killed, although the killers are usually men, being killed, but then the government does nothing to try to combat the killing of men, when the crisis of men dying by homicide is way more. And also suicide. If you even combine suicidality and men dying by homicide, the government basically has got, they're doing nothing to look into that. And I don't know.
So we need to do something to look
definitely,
into that.
We need people to look into that and to take it as a serious problem, because we cannot, although we should look into femicide, they did a good thing to look into femicide. It's a huge problem.
But we are leaving agenda behind.
You cannot just look at femicide and not look at the men who are dying at a 7 times more rate than women by homicide, and also suicide.
Okay.
About 85% of suicide cases are men, and it's uniquely a male epidemic that the government is not looking into at all.
So as we wind up, talk about gaming, and is it good, is it bad? Because I feel like the girls are socialized to be very forthright now.
Yeah.
The boys are good to sit behind a console and do whatever they do. And how do we get the boys to now socialize? You said we've empowered the woman. We are very forthright. We'll talk, we'll say, we'll express our mind, we'll shout.
And women empowerment is good.
Yeah. So now that we've left the boy behind, and there's an alternative, there's gaming, and there's whatever else they access online. How does this affect the boy child? Does it affect positively or negatively? Okay,
so gaming is also another confusing thing, because do you know that there's children who are making money on gaming?
Yes.
There's one,
and I'd like you to talk about that.
And they're making millions and millions of dollars.
Yeah.
But the problem is that not every person is going to make money online by gaming. It's only a tiny minority of gamers who are making a huge amount of money online in gaming. Gaming definitely has got good effects. For example, studies show that surgeons that also game are more precise in their surgery than the surgeons that don't game.
So it does help.
So everything, including drinking water in moderation, can be good for you. But drinking too much water, like the 7 gallons of water a day, that's abnormal. But I'm also a gamer myself. Actually, but for me, I really have to be very careful with my gaming, because I can easily get too much involved in it. But for me, I've learned to control it. I can go for months I still have my console in the house, and I don't play it much.
But it's because you can't control it. Children can't, because their brains are not fully developed.
And also, when we're talking about social deprivation, as what Jonathan Haidt was talking about.
And addiction.
And addiction. Boys that play video games are less likely to go out and meet their friends. They're less likely to go and play. And that in itself will have adverse consequences in their life. And probably that's why we're also having a rise in the number of boys also getting diagnosed with autism. Autism is
screen-induced.
It's a condition that affects your ability to reach social cues. And you learn these social cues when you're able to interact with your mates, when you're able to play with them. And maybe gaming is also leading to that. But
I find that, especially in Kenya, we are more consumers than producers. So yes, the world is online. Yes, the village is virtual. But what is your child doing online? Is it that they're producing something? I find that there's a very small percentage of children,
such a small percentage,
who are producing. And we are consuming. And
Jonathan actually makes the argument that the biggest tragedy in today's generation is that we are overprotecting our children from the outside world, but we are underprotecting them from in the virtual world. And there's a vast amount of dangers that they can that they can face in the
Yeah.
virtual world.
And in the past,
parents
we've
need to
seen
look into that.
these many games that are groomers and they are pedophiles using children images. And I think what my call to parents would be is, what are we doing to ensure, because we can't keep up with the games.
Yeah, we
We
can't.
cannot keep up with the apps that they have. My phone has more use to my children than it has to me. Mine is to answer calls and go on social media. But for the kids, especially the boys, they're able to discover and install things that are going to harm them more, and hence the brain rewiring and all that.
And since you're talking about Jonathan, remember about about the fear of missing out?
Yes.
That one thing that parents can actually do is, your children are terrified of feeling like they're missing out.
Yeah.
You know about Australia also
Yeah.
trying to ban
Yeah.
social media for
Yeah.
anybody below the age of 16. I think
Yeah.
is what every government
a
should
good
do.
thing.
But it's very hard for you to do that for your child
When everybody else has a
when
phone.
everybody else's child has a
Yeah.
phone. When
Yeah.
everybody else's child is playing
Yeah.
the latest game on PS5.
Yeah.
You're a teacher.
Yeah.
I think what teachers can do and parents can do in a given school is meet as a group of parents
Yeah.
and agree that this is harmful for our children. Let us try to do this together.
That's the problem.
Well, let's try to
Every
do this
parent
together.
decides what they want to do.
Yeah.
You are right, I am wrong, you're wrong, I'm right.
Yeah.
And we're not able to be the community. So that's why children are finding such a strong community online.
Yeah, absolutely.
And my wish would be, for example, when it's time to give my child a phone, we can all agree that we're giving a kabambi.
Yeah.
We don't have to have a smartphone. If it's communication, really, if we mean that
Even
it's
children
communication.
themselves say that if you take my smartphone and take away my friend's smartphone, I'll be very,
That's
very
fine.
happy with
Yeah,
life.
yeah.
As a matter of fact, they know that their smartphone is actually damaging them.
They do.
But the thing is that they do not want to miss out.
Yeah.
They do not want to be the only child in school who does not have the latest iPhone.
Yeah.
And so if you can do it together as a group,
Yeah.
I think that's the
And
best way to do it.
I think most parents will do this because they want to feel good about themselves or the child.
Yeah.
I know that sometimes it's to overcompensate for their absence. And I think as a psychologist, I would like you to maybe address parents and say, what do we do to fight for this child, that they are able to gainfully grow into an adult that can function in the world, because the world is ever changing. Technology is going to be ever changing. What would you like to tell parents? What would be the pertinent issues that we need to address to just make sure that we have a whole child?
Can I summarize it with one thing that I mentioned maybe in another forum we were together?
Yes.
The parent must lead. The parent must lead. You have a child that knows a lot.
Yeah.
They've had their mobile phone and their smartphones all their lives.
Yeah.
They know about subjects that you don't know about, but you've got experience, and your experience is through trial and error. It's through a lot years of failure and success.
Yeah.
And I can tell you for a fact that you do know more than than your child does. The problem in today's society is that we allow our children to lead
Yeah.
because they know a lot about politics.
Yeah.
Because they have artificial intelligence in their hands. They know how to use it. They know how to operate the TV remote control better than you do, and you allow them to lead.
Yeah.
So if you can lead, I think a lot of things would improve.
So the parent must lead.
The parent must lead.
Whatever the case, we must be ahead of them.
Absolutely.
All right, Linus, thank you very much for coming to the Teachers Podcast. Maybe you can tell us where we can find you in case somebody needs to find you.
I am on Instagram as Linus Oyugi. I also recently started my own podcast. It's the Above the Algorithm podcast. I'm mostly on those two platforms and also on TikTok under the same names.
Okay, they Above the Algorithm.
The Above the Algorithm.
All right. Thank you very much for being here. Dear parents, I hope you take time to listen to this very wonderful message. Ordinarily, Linus would charge for this information, but he's given it for free. Thank you for being here and have a good day.